All right, welcome back to XYZ. This time we're going to really talk about video games. Now, video games are a huge part of all three of our lives. Probably most Elmeen's and I, but Chris, I know, did a ton of handheld stuff, and of course, Chris plays a lot of games with us these days. So, largely, we're going to talk around of course, the number one game that had like the ultimate impact, on our lives, and then some of the themes or narrative maybe that have changed over time, and really like how the current gaming landscape has changed, compared to maybe what each one of us has grown up with. So let's get to it. All right, so I'm just going to ask probably the easiest one. What is like your number one game of all time?
Good boy.
Or maybe that's the hardest one.
That is the hardest one.
Dude. Well, I'll just go ahead and say, I think for me, even though it's ancient, Riven was that's the first game I was just like totally knocked out with. But that says something about me too, because it's a puzzle game, and most of the ones that I was into are puzzle games. And so that was the one that really got me, and I would have to say that that's still, probably.
Is that like a Myst type of game?
It was Myst 2, basically.
So it's like I'd almost say like a picture book type of game, like where you kind of clicked around, right?
Yeah, there was there were some video clips in there, but they were pretty crude and short, and they weren't really interactive. So yeah, most of the time it was it was like choose your own adventure. You pick where you want to go, and then maybe a video clip would happen. But I think because of the story that went with it, there were beautiful visuals. For then, we're talking like mid '90s, right? But the visuals were amazing for the time, and I'd never seen anything like that before. And the story was good, so I think that's what really killed me about that one. So
how'd you like discover Riven? You just like pick it up at the video game store or what?
Well, actually, a friend of mine from work had showed me Myst and had lent that to me, and I tried that out. I enjoyed it. I was intrigued, but it wasn't, even for the time, it was a little laggy and not very interactive. So I was just waiting. They said that a sequel was coming out. I just was like, waiting. So it was, I knew it was coming. And back then, we weren't really doing a lot of chat rooms or anything. So it was, you went to Best Buy and you saw what was there. That's something you don't see now, but it was like, that's where we got our video games, was Best Buy. And you would just go look for the new titles, and then you waited for the Myst sequel to come to Best Buy.
I remember playing Myst like when I was, I would have been 5, I guess, at the time, and or 6. And I was like, this game's boring.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't even know if I could even like read at that point.
Yeah. No, I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure you guys think it's lame because it's totally lame by today's standards. But for the time, that was just something amazing, and never seen anything like it.
Yeah, I remember my oldest brother being obsessed with it. So it was, I believe you that the story was good and everything. I just obviously was way too young to appreciate anything beyond just, beat 'em ups or, action, whatever, as kids are.
For sure. Yeah. Do you even know what we're talking about, Elmeen?
Been doing a lot of Googling. I have not seen this game, but it reminds me of some recent like puzzle games that came out. The guy, I can't even think about, the guy made Braid. I think he released a puzzle game like similar to that. It looks like this.
It's very much kind of like that same, I'd say like kind of like artsy fartsy. Like it's not really a technically challenging game or anything. It's more like a
interactive movie.
Yeah,
book.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
With puzzles. Yeah.
For my favorite game of all time, had to be either, I don't know if I say, this is hard, man. I haven't say Counter-Strike.
Why?
It got me so into esports, and I think it's the only esport that anyone can sit down and watch and understand what's going on. That's why it was on TV out of all the games. Also the skin market, being able to trade skins and like gamble the skins on the games or on like casino sites was super fun.
Now,
Man.
you're talking Counter-Strike Go or the
Yeah,
OG?
CS:GO.
Okay.
CS:GO. Yeah, I think that was just so much fun.
How old were you? How old were you?
When I was gambling?
Yeah.
12? 2014, so yeah, 12.
All right, so educate
Jeez.
me on Counter-Strike. So I'm sorry, what is, you said this is a first-person shooter, or what is it?
Yeah, it's like a tactical shooter. It was originally a mod of Half-Life 2, and then they kept working on it more and more. And then the version that I played the most was Counter-Strike Go, and that was released in 2011, 2012. And so that was like the most like modern one, and they had these like skins, so you had to it was all in like the Steam marketplace, so you had to get these crates that you would get in a game drop, or you'd buy them from someone, and then you'd pay $2.50 to open these crates up for a chance to like get some rare skins, and you can sell them on the marketplace. But in the early days, before they had a bunch of like bans on this, you could go to these like gambling sites where you could either like bet on what esports team's gonna win a match, or you play like blackjack, roulette, like any casino game you can think of.
And I'm sorry, these are player skins, right? When you say skins, they're like for your character, right?
For your guns.
Oh, for your guns. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then there was marketplaces where you could like sell these skins for like 40% discount, but someone would like PayPal you it. So you can like, otherwise it's like, it all stays inside Steam.
Wow.
It just makes me so worried for like y'all kids these days. It's like, gambling at 12, not that you made it out alive, but it's just like, gosh, the vices that are just at everyone's fingertips these days. It's like, that is just insanity.
And the funny thing about it was one of the biggest teams called FaZe, or they were like an esports org at the time. They wanted to get a Counter-Strike team, but I don't know if you guys know, esports players get paid a ridiculous amount of money. Like tier 1 pros get paid an insane amount of money.
Oh, wow.
So what they did was they actually got this company called CS:GO Wild registered in some like Caribbean country and set up a website where people could gamble their skins, and they would take like a little percentage off each thing. They said at their heyday they were making like $200K a day from just like people just doing all these skins and stuff. And that's how they were the best team. So,
wow.
But my favorite memory of CS:GO Esports was the 2018 Boston Major, where Cloud9, which is like an American roster, they weren't supposed to like do that good at all, and they came up and won the whole thing in like an insane final overtime against FaZe, and I can remember like every single round of overtime.
Wow.
So.
Yeah, it's wow. Like I had played the original Counter-Strike, and again I was like, you die and you have to like watch everyone else. And I was 10 in 2000 when Counter-Strike first came out, and I was like, well, this is boring. Like it's like I was terrible. I was getting schooled by adults at the time, and it was like I'd die instantly, and it was like, well, now I just have to sit and watch people. Like, this is stupid. And so I didn't really ever get into that aspect of it.
For me, it was like, oh my god, I'm not gonna let this happen again. I'm gonna kill you next time.
Well, like that genre, like obviously took off because now that's the majority, I'd say, of like the esports. The popularity is along those types of games.
Yeah, and we played Valorant. It's like when you're playing against people the same skill level as you, it's like pretty fun, especially like when you're all not that good, and just but like I loved Valorant for this, and same with CS:GO. Like once you start getting to like team play, and like you're watching the other team, and like you're watching their old games on like Twitch or YouTube, wherever they're hosting them, and you're like analyzing how they play. And I never played like team sports growing up as a kid, so I really felt like that like football moment where we're like analyzing like where the wide receiver is going to go, where the tight end's going to go. Like I remember staying up freshman year to go against, I think, Wichita State. I watched every single one of their games, and I figured out their formula on. They would shoot the. People don't know, there's a character in Valorant named Sova who would like shoot an arrow, and the arrow would like ping stuff. And I figured out where they shoot their arrow off the bat is what site is. I can figure out what site they're going to go to. So then we completely rolled this team that's supposed to be really good because I just knew where they're going each time. And then we watched the VOD of them playing us, and they're like, they're cheating. They know where we're going. So that was great.
It's just so wild because again, like, so you talk about like the esports thing. So like when I was playing Counter-Strike, part of the thing that was so frustrating is like it was all like private lobbies back then. So like you would get into a game and it was really just whoever else was playing, and whoever decided to join like your server. People just host it. There was no server hosted by Valve or anybody. It was just these randos hosting servers. And so like you talked about like the matchmaking. There was no matchmaking. It was just like you'd get in a match and it was like you could be playing with like the pros or you could be playing with like the chumps, and there could be a mix. And so you just get like in these games and it's like, hi, it's my first time. And this dude who's got 10,000 games under his belt just absolutely rolls you, and it doesn't care. And that'll happen until you're gone. And it's like, and then and all of those things happened. And then you'd leave the server and there was no YouTube. There was no, there was maybe like some gaming forums, but this was pre-YouTube. There was no one recording this. All of that is like gone, and so there was no like community really like around these things besides you'd have to like get off on forums and then like go and talk to people. And then of course there's like IRCs and stuff, kind of like the proto chat stuff. But
I think it's something you probably didn't know about at the time, but for the longest time until I think Counter-Strike, I think it's still around, it was called ESEA, and people really liked it because they had like a custom anti-cheat. So you would download this anti-cheat, so you're playing in these lobbies, and it had like matchmaking at the time, so like they gave you like an elo and stuff. So I remember paying for that for a while, but like that was the matchmaking at the time, that ESEA stuff.
So Ben, what's your favorite game?
So it's really hard to choose. I think I have different favorites based on like kind of different stages of my life, but like it's the number one's got to be like EverQuest. And you'd think it would be World of Warcraft because I kind of talked about that last episode a lot, but EverQuest was really like, it changed like how my entire brain like works, I guess. And it absolutely hijacked like every single bit of dopamine in my head, rewired the entire thing, and kind of changed like the trajectory a bit of what I liked and everything. So and the reason that is, if you're unfamiliar with EverQuest, it was a massively multiplayer online game. It was the first like 3-dimensional one, like truly 3-dimensional, not top down or anything. It was first person, and you talk to people like online, and that was wild in 1999. And kind of like I mentioned in the last episode, I got made fun a lot for it, but it like it was literally like I lived in the middle of nowhere, and it was sort of like my way to connect with people, right? Like,
yeah.
And I was a total loser, at school, and then I'd come home and it was like, I was like a level 50 warrior, and it was like people would like group with me and like depend on me, it was like really cool. And I was really good at like playing the auction house and stuff like that. There was no actual auction house, but I was really good at like bartering with people because that was the only way to like trade stuff. But that game took so many of my hours. I think I probably ended up putting more into World of Warcraft, but definitely like probably had an entire year of my life like logged into that game.
Wow.
So it took a lot of time, but and also like my oldest brother played that, and my brother Jim played that too, who I grew up with really close. And so it was also like a way for like all of us to really hang out. And so it was basically like, I got to play with like the coolest people in my life, too. And that was really it.
Cool. My first wife, that game always intrigued me when I saw it at Best Buy, but then my first wife would not let me get it because of the woman on the front cover. You remember what the
for
box
sure.
looked like?
Oh yeah.
So I was not allowed to play EverQuest.
Yeah. So if you're unfamiliar, the woman is actually basically scantily clad. She has a stave, and then she basically just has like a bra on and like panties, and like that's it. Yeah.
None of that for Chris.
Yeah, right. That person like really never appeared in the game until like years later. But yes, it's
yeah. I was gonna say for the Gen Zers out there, there's this common meme where in Grand Theft Auto they also had the same thing, but it was also on the loading screen. like it would cycle through all the images, and sometimes the images would be like that girl. And there's like a meme where it's like you don't know like pure anxiety, and like you don't know if your parents are gonna walk in the room as like the loading screen's passing by.
Oh, yeah, I remember playing Vice City and having that, like, absolutely Grand Theft Auto Vice City. It was like some of the loading screens you'd hit, and you're like, kind of do like the look around, like,
Hello?
yeah, right, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Remember when I would play it at my cousin's? I would always like turn the TV off and like wait, like I would count a little bit and then I'd turn it back on, because all I wanted to do was drive around and like shoot people. So I just wanted to make sure the screen was out of there.
Yeah, I remember so many times, especially with EverQuest. Like, so back in the day, in order to connect to the internet, you had this, you had a modem, and you actually had to like use a phone cord to do that. And it's all been like abstracted away at such a high level now. But back then, you actually like it like would literally like dial your phone number, and it would like make this super loud like do 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 do, and it was like beep, beep, yeah, beep. Yeah, right. Chris is, yeah, exactly, and like Jim and I would like wake up at like 1 a.m. in the morning to like, we'd be scheming. We're like, oh, gotta play, because we were so addicted to it. And like, we would like put a pillow over the modem to like mute it.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then, because like there's no turning the noise off. I mean, maybe there was, but like we didn't know how to do that. So put a pillow over it and mute it. And then like you'd get connected in, and like, you basically like be looking over your shoulder constantly, like if my parents woken up or whatever, and you'd like you'd hear like a floorboard crack, and you would like instantly turn your monitor off, and hide underneath the desk, and like it was just so funny the levels like you would go to like play these games, not get caught.
And you probably had one phone line, right? So if they picked up the phone, they would have heard that sound,
for sure,
right?
And worse, it would disconnect you from the game, which is the worst.
Yeah, that was so frustrating when you had somebody else in the house that just pick up the phone and then connection lost.
Yeah, I remember it was like getting 2 phone lines is a big deal, because like when you could have one use the internet and the other person could actually use the phone. But anyone that would try to like call your house, they would get the dial tone or the modem sound, in their ear, and so it was like no one could contact you until you disconnected from the internet, unless you had 2 phone lines.
For me, I remember having my Nintendo DS, and I was playing, it was either like Mario Party or Pokemon Black. I would just like play on it, and then I would have the volume to like the very littlest, and then whenever you hear like my parents like walking in the door, I would slam it shut under the pillow and like fake sleep. I'm like, I think I got pretty good at it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I faked out my parents so many times. Like they caught me a couple times, but I was batting probably like 99% of like. Yeah.
When it came to like summer times, I wasn't in school and I was into Minecraft and playing on servers. I think I wouldn't go to bed till the next morning. I remember one time I was living one time with and it was like 4 in the morning, and I was playing Minecraft on Bedrock something. I think that was a server name. But anyway, I hear gunshots go off like 6 times. I'm like, oh, it's actual gunshots. So I close my laptop because I'm a little kid. I'm super scared. I go to my parents' room, like I heard gunshots. And they're like, no, you didn't. Go back to bed. Next morning, it's like 2 blocks down or 2 streets down. It's like house got shot up. Like, oh, okay.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was right.
Wow.
Wow.
But yeah, that ruined my Minecraft gaming session. So that wasn't cool.
So I'm curious. So you guys both talked about sneaking things from your parents. What was, and you don't have to say this if you don't want, but what was like the time you got them in the most trouble, and what was your consequence for playing video games when you shouldn't have been?
Oh my.
Or maybe you don't want
it was
say.
constant. My parents hated video games. They absolutely hated it. They thought like, I don't know what they thought of them, but I remember there was solid, I don't know what I did. Probably like just a little back talking or something, but they took the power cable away from my PS3 for like 3 months.
Ooh, 3 months.
But they didn't realize my monitor power cable
It's
also
the
worked
same.
on PS3. So
Yes.
I just plugged into my TV, did the same thing, and then I acted like I did a pretty good act. I was like, "Can I have it? Can I have it this weekend?" They're like, "No," and so I'm like, "Okay." But
Oh my
you know,
gosh.
they when they went to work, I ran downstairs and played on PS3. So
Gambling at 12, scamming his parents at 14, whatever.
entrepreneurial activities.
Yeah, I think I'm like thinking probably the worst time was I got sent. So like I wanted to not go to Boy Scout camp, and so my parents basically threatened like we're gonna take away, or I lived with just my mom. Basically, like I'm gonna take away, the internet for like an entire month if you don't go to camp for like a week. And that was like, it was basically something that it was essentially like the trump card for most of like my growing up was like, because we lived in the middle of nowhere, there's literally nothing to do. So it was like, if she was like, I'm taking the internet away, it's like you had to do it because there was literally nothing else to do. So it was like constantly like, I'm going to take the internet away, it was like, fine, and then you just go and like do it. It was the worst. But it was constant, like, same with Elmine. It was just constant of getting in trouble, I guess. I think, no, I don't think I ever got like super in trouble. I'd say almost like, my mom and then my stepdad, when my mom like remarried, they both like were probably like way too lax on our usage of the internet and stuff. And probably should have regulated it a bit more, and I don't know, found us something to do. But I don't know, it was kind of too late at that point too, because we'd already been, my mom was way, I don't know, overwhelmed, or I don't know, in a bad spot mentally, like until I was maybe like 11 or 12, and by then we'd already been playing games for years at that point, been playing EverQuest for years. And so it was like it was too late. And so yeah,
I think for me, they just realized I could get around it too many times. Either like go to someone else's house, new power cables, have some hidden console somewhere. But yeah, for me, it was sort of the same thing. Like I didn't live in the middle of nowhere, but there was no kids around me, and the neighborhood was kind of sketchy. So it was either like hanging out in the backyard and like shoot my like BB gun, or go play games. So kind of option for the video games part. I do remember the Boy Scouts like trying to get kids to like tell their parents to let them join. I was like, I don't want to go in the middle of the woods. That sounds boring. That sounds boring as hell.
Yeah, it wasn't really worth it. Like, I remember I guess the most trouble I've ever got, like, seen someone get into was actually my oldest brother. And I tell this story a lot, but essentially my oldest brother, we got a like Windows 95 computer, and it actually like had a modem in it. And Warcraft 2 had just come out, which is like a real-time strategy game. And it was like a game that you could actually play with people over the internet. And if you're unaware, the internet used to cost like a shit ton of money. Like, just, it was essentially like, I mean, if this is my example's even getting dated, but like you used to have to pay for like phone, usage and stuff like that. It was like $2 a minute to like play with someone over there. I would just absurd. And like he played like Warcraft 2, I think, for like an entire weekend with his friend. And it was like it was like $2,000. Like the bill came, and I swear to God, my dad was in like he was like on the other side of the house, and I heard him as if he was yelling in my ear next to me. He was so mad. I mean, the internet bill was thousands of dollars just to play Warcraft 2. And like he went over to that computer, he opened that up, found the modem, and just ripped it. And everything was soldered back then. He just took that modem and ripped that thing right out of the
probably
computer.
Ruined the whole motherboard.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. And he ripped it out, and I shit you not, an hour later, my brother, my oldest brother's there, like soldering it, like, oh my God. Yeah. He was really good, like with computers, especially back in the day. They were very arcane than they are now. And like, he had figured it all out, and so, he had fixed it up, and that was pretty much the final straw. I think he actually got kicked out. I think he was like almost 18 at that point, but I think he got kicked out soon after.
Man, that's crazy. Like, that's, dude, $2 a minute. Was he good at Warcraft 2 though? Did he win?
I don't even remember. It taught me nothing though. That's how I kind of always end that story. It's like I got hooked on computers, basically sitting there, like just like all starry eyed, like watching like this game play out. Is like, oh my god, it's like someone over across town. Wow.
One interesting theme that I'm hearing is that back in my day when we did have those video games, it was a very solitary activity. There were some that were like 2-player, but most of the time when we did play it was very solitary. You just waited until it was your turn and you played it by yourself. And now you guys pretty much, it's a social activity. Everything you're doing is very social. Like Ben mentioned, you're out in the middle of nowhere, and that's maybe you're not getting to know people in the same way that you would in person, but it's kind of interesting that. Yeah.
Do you guys? How was like the video games like culture wise, like growing up? Like, was it like nerdy, cool, or what was it?
Yeah, I think Ben touched on this last time. It was super nerdy, and it was like, even though lots of people played it and or desired to have a video game, you didn't talk about it because that was like you were a nerd. Yeah. There was a stigma.
Yeah, it was very much, you were a super loser. And it was like, I mean, it just like compounded for me. It was like, I was super poor. I had not good clothes. I probably didn't shower enough. Just the compounding problems that I had as a kid. And then it's like, you play video games and you play video games online and you pay to play them online. It was just like,
Super
everything.
Nerd.
Yeah, right. Everything was going wrong. It was the whole shebang of, wow, you are the loserest of the losers. And then World of Warcraft came out. And then I was not the only kid anymore. It was Jim and I were not the only kids anymore doing it. It was like,
it was
everyone's on it.
Yeah, and then there was actually like a larger group of people where it was like they wanted to play too, but their parents wouldn't pay for it. But it's like, oh, your parents do pay for it. You're pretty cool, know. So I went my social ladder climbed 3 prongs that day.
Now, I will backtrack on one thing I said, though. It's like video games in the arcades, which was like where most of us were playing it at that time. That was socially acceptable. That was cool. Go with your friends to the arcade and play Pac-Man or Missile Command or whatever. That was okay. But if you were doing it at home on a video game console, now that nerd.
Yeah, I remember like Chris, you mentioned like Best Buy. I remember like going to multiple stores to like find video games back then too. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh, this game came out and it's not here, so let's try somewhere else. And also like back then, like a ton of places were trying, they would sell video games. It was kind of like same with like video or VCRs. What were those called? The
VHS or
VHS. Thank you. Gosh. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. VHS is like, I mean, there was all these places. It was like, you'd go and get your groceries and then you would rent a movie at the, at Hy-Vee or Walmart or whatever, and like all these places like do that. And it's like, they would also like rent out video games and like sell video games and stuff. And all these places like had all these side gigs, they were doing. And I remember just like when World of Warcraft came out, I remember like bugging my dad for like, I don't know, 2 weeks, like prepping him, like, this game's coming out. We got to get it. And it was like, and I remember we went to like 4 different stores and we were up in some of my family was up in Wisconsin, it was in Thanksgiving, and we had drove all the way up there and we were really there for that. And I was like, we got to go and get this. Just constantly bugging him. Like, we got to go. And like, finally he's like, this kid is never going to shut up until we get this. And like, he bought me World of Warcraft and like, we went to like 4 different places to get it, to find it. But yeah, you had to get the box. There was no like online stores back then or anything like that.
Yeah. I remember that because I remember towards when I was younger, it was like you'd get the game and then you'd have to, I remember the PS2 games, it was all on a CD. And the PS3 games, like you would just pretty much just like a glorified key, kind of put it in and you gotta wait for it to download. So I remember I would only get 1 game a year, and I'd always opt for the Call of Duty, or if there was like a game on that was like a few bucks at GameStop, if I had like enough change like saved up. But I would always pick the new Call of Duty. I remember one year for some reason I wanted like Mario versus Sonic in the Olympics, and we went to like so many different stores and I could never find it. But so I never got to play that game. So I don't know if you guys did.
So I'm curious, Ben, the Warcraft, was it, I'm assuming it was on CD at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember the first ones. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and you mentioned like the box art, the sexy woman on the box art. The box arts were like, was what got people, essentially a product thing. Like the box arts were awesome. I still have a bunch of them actually in my office. Like the old box art was legit as hell. Like it was
I used
awesome.
to collect them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah, they were awesome, and like they were, embossed. They're 3-dimensional. It was insane.
The dwarf with the gun.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And now it's you don't even get a key anymore. It's just a digital download. And and the boxes used to come with like maps and guides and sometimes even figurines. And then they started coming out with the collector's edition. They were like, oh, we can really make money on this, and they're like, get a signed copy of a map, or
we'll put everything in gold.
Yeah, right.
Make everything gold for the
gold plated. Oh yeah, it got really markety. But yeah, I've got some of the collector's editions that it just came with. It was like $120, and it just came with. It was an entire experience, just the box.
Yeah, I remember I wanted the Lich King so bad. Mm-hmm. My cousins were playing it. My parents never got it for me, but I would always sit. I don't know if you guys ever had this experience, but my cousin was playing with Warcraft. I really, really, really wanted it so bad, so I would sit behind him on his bed. I would just sit there, and he's like, "You can't make a noise," because he's talking to his friends on like Skype or like Ventrilo. And I would just sit there and I would just like watch him play. And then sometimes he would let me play, but I didn't realize it till like later. He would get me to farm stuff for him. He would tell me what buttons to press, and me being like the 8-year-old kid, I'm like, this is awesome. And so I think there was times where I was like 2 or 3 hours. I was like a bot farmer for him at that point.
That's awesome. Chris, you mentioned that your first wife wouldn't let you play EverQuest. Like, did you ever play like World of Warcraft or anything, or do you at least remember that happening?
I remember it being a thing, but by that point, I was a dad by that point, and I had lots of other stuff going on. So,
yeah, I remember hearing a lot of stories about EverQuest, especially. Like, it was a very time intensive game, and like, there was basically deliberate time sinks in the game too, and so and like something would like only spawn, I guess, like once a week, and it's like if you didn't get it that once a week, you had to wait another week. So like people would like wait, spawn at 2 a.m. right? And like I remember there were stories of people like they call it like Evercrack, like they literally would call the game Evercrack, and like it would like break up like people's wives and like ruin families. And like I remember there was someone got like a sword, like someone you could like they called it ninja looting, but you could essentially like steal other people's things that they had killed occasionally. And this guy like ninja looted some sort of sword that this other guy had been trying to get for months and months, and the guy actually like found in real life and like killed him, like not even joking, like actually murdered him over this virtual sword. And it was like this big thing in the news. I was like, oh, and like I remember like I think like the developers of the game like had to like respond, to this incident, because it was like the very first like killing of a video game item, in the world or something.
Was that dragged through the media?
Yeah, for sure. It was like violence in games.
Was that the South Park? Is that what that episode was kind of based on, or is that something else? That World
I'm not sure.
Because they talk about that they need to get back in the game, and okay.
Yeah, I just looked this up. And 15% of divorce proceedings, like video games, are mentioned, and it's like mostly World of Warcraft and Call of Duty were like the top ones.
Yeah, I remember World of Warcraft widow being a term. Yeah, the closest I got to anything like that with online games is Diablo 2. That was the one I played online. And but the thing was, like so many of them, they didn't, like you said, there really wasn't a matchmaking thing or anything like that. And you just had player killers, P-killers going everywhere. So you would just they would just come find you and kill you. Take your stuff. That's it. It wasn't very fun. So I stopped.
I don't think we'll ever get to that like World of Warcraft fandom again, unless like where it's like mainstream people are playing it, unless it gets to some like, in my personal opinion, I think it's like if it gets to like VR level where you can like really immerse yourself, like some Sword Art Online stuff. that everyone wants to play. But yeah, there hasn't been like an MMO like that again.
It's so like fractured now too, and like you said, I think there's got to be, to me, like there's got to be some sort of technology that comes into play, like virtual reality or something that like, it becomes like sort of this just bespoke technology, and there's like one game, that is like the thing doing it. I know there's been a couple like VR MMOs that have come out and stuff, but yeah, it's really hard to believe. I don't know how close you guys follow this, but like for a long time after World of Warcraft came out, there was like, all these MMOs trying to compete or copycat or stuff like that. And it was like, oh, is this going to be the World of Warcraft killer? And like that went on for probably even still today. It was like every single MMO that came out, it's like, this is the WoW killer. And it ended up not being that. But like, I don't think that thing exists anymore. I think there's just too many games nowadays. There's too many samey experiences. I think it's really going to take something really unique and different that's going to do that.
Because that's what World of Warcraft was. It was so different and so unique for the time.
Yeah. I mean, it had really taken all, like EverQuest, it really took all those time sinks and made them a lot more accessible to people. It's like, hey, sometimes, I mean, I'd play EverQuest and it was like, it would take me all night to like find a group, and I would, it would take me 4 hours to like find a group to like finally start killing some monsters with. And it was like, and then I had to go to bed, 30 minutes later. And it was like, well, that's my entire day, and like, they really like synthesized that and made it like, hey, this takes 30 minutes instead of 4 hours, and then I can actually play.
Do you ever meet any of like the legendary EverQuest players? I watched a documentary like a few years ago about it. I don't remember their names, but there's some really crazy like stories that like people have like told, and there's like EverQuest documentaries. I recommend for like people to go watch those. It's really cool.
Yeah, I remember. I didn't play with them, but like a lot of the big like EverQuest dudes ended up being like working at Blizzard. Actually, like one of the guys was like the lead developer, and he actually made like Overwatch too. Like I forget what his name was. Jeff Kaplan. Like he originally was just like some no-lifer playing EverQuest. Like that was it. He just no-lifed in EverQuest, and he would always like rage post on the forums. And then like Blizzard's like, hey, this dude knows how to like, play MMOs. And so they hired him to design some of the stuff in World of Warcraft. And then it was like, hey, I work at Blizzard. And now he's like this legendary game designer. He was the lead designer for Overwatch, but he literally was just like some, no life EverQuest dude. And it was like, yeah, that was it.
His guild leader was the lead designer at Blizzard at the time. I'm looking this up. That's crazy.
Sure. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, he's a meme too.
Yeah.
Jeff Kaplan.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, his character name in EverQuest was Tiggle Bitties. So
oh jeez.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember like the first game that was like, holy shit? Like I remember graphics for the longest time were like what mattered the most. Like, do you guys remember any games that like really like shocked you?
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I already mentioned Riven. That was the one that just shocked me.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's lame again, but I mean, there's just like the stuff that they built with those worlds with using CGI was just amazing for the time. It just really blew my mind. But
I remember. I think I played Myst or Riven, and like I was like, oh my god, like this does look like super good. Obviously, it was you couldn't do anything in there, but like it was like probably the most graphically intense thing at the time for sure. I remember that. Mine was like Half-Life. That game, I played that game way too early. I think it came out in like 97 or something. Jim, my older brother, bought it. That game scared the shit out of me. Like I don't know if you guys ever played
crabs?
It. Yeah, yeah. So there's like these monsters, and they would jump at you, and they were called head crabs, and they would literally jump on your head, and like underneath them was teeth, and like it was just the most terrifying thing. And they're like the very first thing you encounter in the game, and it's like this. Basically, the introduction is like you're a scientist, and like an experiment goes wrong, and like all these aliens show up, and it's like all of a sudden it's like I'm like 7 years old, and it's like this really engaging, terrible, scary game. And I already mentioned my mom was basically not really in the picture, so we just like played this, and it was like, great, I have nightmares for the next 5 years because of this. Awesome.
Now, what was this game again?
It's called Half-Life.
Half-Life. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the cover art for that.
For me, it was the first game that was like, oh my god, it was Crysis 3, I think.
Oh yeah, I remember the OG of that one. Yep.
Yeah, Crysis 3 came out, and I actually like bricked my PS3 somehow playing this for so much. That game was awesome. I need to go back and replay these. But I was like, oh my god, the graphics are so cool. It's realistic. I also remember looking back at this, it was so embarrassing. I really remember showing my dad like the trailer of Black Ops 1 and being like, look how awesome it is. Like, we have to get this one. This one's going to be way better than the other ones. And they have zombies and it's awesome and it's realistic. Look how good the graphics are. I'm looking back at them. I'm like, oh my god, dude. But yeah, I remember it was like the console wars, how good the graphics were. It's like, that's when gaming was just like pure.
Probably if EverQuest was like my number one most played game, my second one would probably be, you remember like those little handheld games? Like, I'm sure Chris, you remember this, like the little, you could like buy them like in stores and stuff. It was like Monopoly and like the racing games and like those. Like my mom got so tired of us in the car. And of course, nowadays I have kids of my own. I give them tablets, so it's essentially like a proto tablet, but like she'd literally like give us like a Monopoly game. And like, I would play those in the car constantly. We literally had batteries in the car for those things. It was like, we'd had 2 Monopoly things or like, and the game, the little handheld thing could only play Monopoly, but that was it. Or Pong or whatever it was. Some of them were absolute trash. Like just the like I remember there was one that was like Dragon Ball Z handheld, and like the game was actually impossible. I think it was the code was actually broken or something. It was impossible to play. I don't know.
I remember some of those. They were like LCD displays, right? Was that what?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was like it reminded me of like the Etch-a-Sketch displays. Yeah.
And they would just like have random images and stuff, and it would beep at you, and I'd be like, what's going on here? I swear half of those games were broken. They didn't make any sense.
And they were like $5, and God, they were so like addictive when they would like, because I mean, there was just nothing else to do in a car, and like we would like, I remember we drove from Iowa to like Salt Lake City, which is like a multi-day drive, and it was just like, we just played those the entire time because we were too poor to have Game Boys or anything. And it was like, God, they were terrible, but there was nothing else to do.
Okay, so just as an aside note, I have a thing from the 1970s I'm still salty about. Not really, but kind of.
Let's hear it.
So in 1977, now keep, this is before video games were even a thing or anything like that. I mean, Pong, you could probably find it in a tavern or somewhere if you wanted to, but kids didn't have that. And there was this game that came out. It had batteries, but it was mostly wind up, and it was called Blip. And it was like a Pong clone, sort of. It was trying to rip off Pong, but so you wound the timer up, you turned it on, and all the battery was doing was lighting up the little LED ball, and then each player had 3 buttons. So instead of like a paddle that goes up inside, you had 3 buttons you had to choose from, and when the ball came over to your side, you had to pick which button it was, and that's. And that was, I wanted one of those so badly for Christmas in 1977. I was like, oh, I wanted these. I'm going to get one of these. And nope, I never got one. Never played one.
Was it mechanical or like this?
It was mechanical. Okay. The like I said, it had a battery, but the only thing electronic about it really was the LED that lit up, I believe. And so you had a timer that you wound, and that's really what round. It was like, on like a clockwork game, basically. And anyway, that was my
thinking of like, I think of like that time period, and like, Chris, did you ever play? In a little context here, I've always heard like some of you look at like the 10 worst games like in history, like the entire history, and I think probably the number one is like this E.T.
Yes, I knew you were going to say.
Did you ever play that game?
We got it on clearance once, and I heard or I saw a documentary where they like buried all the leftover cartridges. Yeah. So I'm surprised I was able to find one that was in a bin, because that was like when we got Atari. It was after it was like no longer cool to have an Atari, but it was in it was on some really discount. You probably got it for $20 or something, and the cartridges were like $1 a piece or something in the bargain bin. So we're like, oh, ET, and we took it home, tried to play it, and I never understood what the hell was going on. I couldn't do anything. You couldn't get out of the hole. It was like, but I remember there being other games like that too. I remember there being one, and oh gosh, I wish I could remember the name of this guy's, and I wanted to say it's something Quest, but all I can think is EverQuest now.
Like Hero Quest?
No, I don't remember.
Mystic
but it was
Quest?
Like,
okay.
I'll
stop naming them off.
No, I'm sorry. I'm like, but
Quest.
it was Quest. But it was one of the early Atari games, but it was supposed to be like this amazing title, and we got it. And half the game was in a little comic book, and you were supposed to read the comic book to come up with clues on how to play the game.
Sword Quest. Yep.
Sword Quest. Yes. Oh, you've heard of this one?
Yes, I watched an Atari documentary.
Oh my God. Well, my brother and I spent hours on this thing scanning this comic book for like what the clues were, and we found a couple, but then we couldn't figure out how that applied to the game. Never like made any progress in the stupid. We were so frustrated, and I think that was pretty much the end of the Atari for us. We were just like, we got that in the Pac-Man game, and the Pac-Man was like an 8-bit, like the most ridiculous. It didn't look anything like Pac-Man. We just gave up on that. We were like, no.
Was that like a proto like DRM type of thing, or was it actually like trying to be part of the game?
It was trying to be part of the game.
I see.
Yeah, it wasn't DRM. It was just like, because the limitations on that original Atari, and they could only fit so much on a cartridge. It only had so much memory. The graphics were terrible, blocky 8-bit. So they couldn't really do what they had envisioned for this game. It was supposed to be like an adventure fantasy game, I guess. But so they just made this, like, it looked like a DC or Marvel comic book, but it was about, it was like a game booklet though. And that was where you were supposed to get like the idea and the story of what the game was. And that's where the clues were, like I said. But then the game was just so lame and stupid. I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm curious. I'll have to find that documentary. What was the overall? What the documentary say about it?
I think it just mentioned about like someone. It wasn't like a long piece about it. It was someone mentioning about like you have to get the book, and then it's like wait into like the cheat game that where they say like the books with all like the cheats in them and stuff, and like how to beat games. I was gonna ask. I can ask this later, but have you guys ever bought like a book for a video game?
No, I would go into like Barnes and Noble sometimes and like browse through them, but never bought them.
No, never. I don't think I ever bought those. I do remember for my son in the 90s, who was first, just getting into like the Game Boy stuff, you could buy these cheat cartridges. Do you remember that? Like it was like a cartridge that had a cartridge slot in it. So you would plug it into the Game Boy, and then you'd plug your cartridge into this thing, and it would allow you to like do God mode and those kind of things where you could cheat.
Yeah, I remember having one of those for the Super Nintendo. It was like, it was, you basically, you plug it in. It plugged into the Super Nintendo, and you plug it into it, and it would like let you essentially cheat. It had all these ways for you to cheat on any game.
Yeah, I remember.
No, I never bought a book.
For the book thing, I remember my cousin, when Skyrim came out, he got a book for it, and he would have me like read stuff to like tell him what to do. I remember like the first like cave you go into, you have to like spin these giant stones to like match the pattern up there. But yeah, that was crazy. I don't think books are like a big thing anymore, but I remember like always wanting to get those because the cover looked so cool.
Yeah.
But for like cheats and stuff, did you guys ever cheat in video games?
I never did like online or anything like that. I don't know. I was never compelled to do that. Obviously played with plenty of cheaters in my time. But I just never got into that. Yeah. I mostly played like online games where it was like, if you cheated and got banned, like you lost all your progress, and it was like, like years of potential progress. So it was never like worth it to me.
Right.
Yeah, so
I feel an Elmine story coming on.
So when I'm trying to think the first game I cheated in. I think it would be Minecraft as the first game I cheated in because we'd play Minecraft Factions, and you download this cheat client. And it was ridiculously easy to set up, which is surprising. And then it had like a cheat menu. You could set up like X-raying and like tracers to see like if there's a player like rendering next to you, or if there's like you could do ones where it's called like spider, where you could like climb up walls like vertically like a spider, or you could like fly around some servers. Um, and then that was really fun because I was playing on these servers where like everyone was doing it, and they didn't really have any like rules at the time, so that was pretty fun. And then the next game I cheated in was Modern Warfare 2 was really cool because they called it like I never learned how to like get the cheats onto my PS3, but if you were in a lobby with someone with cheats, they could give you the cheat menu somehow. I have no idea how, but like you could get like some mod menu. And I remember going like Modern Warfare 2 lobbies and thinking I was like really cool because I was making everyone like fly around in the air or like just like spawning in a bunch of like AC-130s at the time, and that was really cool. And then, and then the next game I cheated. I promise for my professional gaming career, I never cheated. This is only when I was like a really young kid. When I first got Counter-Strike, I remember I got so mad because I died to a cheater. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get cheats. So I searched up like CSGO cheats, got some forums, got some cheats in there, and played one game and got banned. And I was like, damn, that sucks. And then fast forward to like junior or sophomore year of college, my final was I made CSGO cheats in C++. It was all offline though. Didn't do it online. But that was really fun. So that came full circle. But I always thought it was cool. Like just, I always want to know how to do it, but like breaking the rules in a video game was always just so cool to me.
I want to jump back real quick to the mechanics. We talked about like ET being an absolute piece of shit, and largely because it didn't tell you how to play the game. I mean, I think it had a ton of bugs and everything too, and then, the sort of that Sword Quest game being like really hard to do. And I was thinking of a game, it was actually Dungeons and Dragons related. It was called Pool of Radiance. It was sort of like a Dungeons and Dragons game on your computer, but it had like, speaking of kind of like DRM and mechanics, it actually had sort of how they would prevent people from just sharing CDs back then was like there essentially be like somewhere 5 or 6 hours into the game you had to like they would give you like a physical ring and you had to like put whatever essentially a decoder ring like drink your Ovaltine type of thing, and you had to like put this code in, and then you would go on, and if you got it wrong you would get into this impossible fight, right? But I feel like there was a point, I guess, where the games, especially like those early games like ET, like there wasn't probably just even enough space and memory to like fit also like how do you play the game along with like
right
playing the game,
Right.
And so
right.
they basically said, well, we better just at least have a game there. But now like the games, it's the whole like the evolution of like the mechanics, the games have gotten so complicated now, but also like there's so much shit in your face constantly. It's like I think of these games like basically any open world game, but I'm going to pick on like Assassin's Creed or any sort of open world. It's like or Skyrim even. It's like you come in and it's like there's a gajillion quest markers and there's a gajillion points of interest, and it's like I get into these games and it's like I get like anxiety just looking at these games now. It's like I don't have time to do all of this. It's like there's no like natural flow, and I honestly feel like there was I don't know, sort of like a sweet spot somewhere, in the late 90s or early 2000s, like where it was like, there was sort of like an emphasis on game, like conveyance, like there like, hey, let's design the level where it kind of flows you to like the correct spot, let people figure it out. And then now it's just like tutorial, it's like you spend 2 hours of the game in the tutorial, like just trying to figure out how to play the game. And that's another thing. It's like I just finished Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and it's like I would take a break from that, because I have kids, and it's like I'd come back and it's like I have no idea how to even play this game anymore, because the mechanics are so hard. It's like I struggle just, I guess, to play games now because of the mechanics and having to come back to them.
Yeah, and it's another thing about it. It's like, I don't know if it's just me being older and not playing too many single player games recently, but it's like there's not that many games like that I've played like high school to now. Like I want to go replay at all. Just I don't know. They kind of lost that, but it could also. I feel like it's just a thing with getting older. Like you mentioned Assassin's Creed being like so much UI. I'm like, that game was awesome. The UI was perfect. What is he talking about? So I don't know.
I think like maybe like the original couple were okay, but I don't know. I feel like there is definitely, I think of like, and it might be some rose colored glasses, some bias here, but like I think of really like the Super Nintendo games as like really hitting that sweet spot. There was a lot of like really good bangers in there that, really had that conveyance. Of course, it's a simpler medium and stuff, but 32-bit games are still very popular even today. And I feel like that was sort of the sweet spot of like, hey, we can make a compelling story with graphics, but not like, I don't know, kill your eyeballs with just stuff going on too, and sub menus and those types of things.
You think they're running out of ideas and they just like put more stuff up there? I mean, because you talked about what's going to be the next best thing. Are they just out of new ideas for games, or?
I feel like it. I do.
I think it's really easy to make games now, just like it's so easy to make music. Chris, like,
oh yeah,
it's really easy to make shitty music. It's really easy to make shitty games, push them out. Yep. And also, like, it's really hard because video games don't really make too much money sometimes if they're not like, it's a free to play game, but you can buy skins, and there's also a battle pass, and there's also this too, and there's also more DLC you can pay for. I just feel like, I don't know, indie games are always still so good. There's always new ideas coming out, but like it's kind of hard to find those.
Just like the traps nowadays with games too, like the payment traps. You're talking about like the free to play. It's like you can play this game for free, and it's like you can buy skins and you can buy ways to fast forward stuff, and I'm sure Chris, your son runs into this a lot, where it's like, he wants to maybe pay for something, to go faster, or this game has skins, and it's just like back in my day, it was like it was $60 for a game, and that was it. And then I remember in 2007, like Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion came out with horse armor, and it was like $2 horse armor, and it was this big thing, and like the entire internet was all mad about it. But that was like the most marketing genius thing ever, because that Pandora's box got opened and that shit never shut ever again. And now it's like I've played games where it's like you get like these whales in there, and they dump tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a game, and it's like, good God, what?
Yeah, and oh my God, don't even start with mobile games. Mobile games are so trash. I have yet to play a good mobile game. It's just always my girlfriend loves Candy Crush, and I was explaining to her, I think like last night, I was like, do you notice all the candies, the saturation's maxed out 100%, just like a slot machine? You notice how every single time you do something, there's always some little effect or some little thing. It's like, and I remember reading about this one in like high school when I was doing like a paper on like video games. It's like this, it's literally designed like a slot machine, and it's, I don't know.
I feel like it's gotten so synthesized now, where it's like there's so much like data, and there's so much understanding of how to like literally hijack the dopamine in your brain, where it's like there's no more like love and spirit of making these things. It's all just like, besides like the indie games, which I feel like have a lot higher breakout percentage than like it's the yearly release of Black Ops, it's like Call of Duty, it's like, for God's sake, how many Call of Duties have there been? Like 30 at this point?
Yeah, and it's like, oh my God, if you're a software engineer, never look at software patents, but video game patents are insane. Like there's so much stuff that you can look at, like what Activision Blizzard has like patented, where it's all about like we said, like the dopamine, making sure the players are like always into it, and people are like, we really don't want like skill based matchmaking to be a thing. We just want to like get in lobbies and like sometimes we'll kick ass, sometimes we won't. And they're like, well, no, you don't actually want that because according to our data, you won't play the game as much. It's like, come on, dude.
Yeah.
So what are there things that you would like to see in, like, where would you like to see gaming go? Like, what are some things you can see? Like, everybody's talking about AI now, but I mean, that kind of stuff, games have always kind of had some kind of artificial intelligence, right? So what's going to be the next big thing? Where do you want to see it go? That's a hard question.
I honestly think with the AI stuff, I want to be able to talk to an NPC about like stuff that's happening, like just talk to him like a normal thing. Like, it'd be really cool to play some sort of like medieval like RPG game and be like, what have you heard about this? And like they can take inputs from like around the world, like what you have done and like how what you do like affects the story. I think that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, to me, I think that's it's there's going to be some sort of breakthrough like that, and that I think that's a really good one. But I think it's sort of that unique experience. Like every single person that plays this game has a different experience of the game, and it's not just like choose a different path. It's like truly like dynamic. And I know that I'm sure that has like Elmine mentioned the data. I'm sure that has some sort of like negative side effect on playability or like people wanting to have the same experience as someone streaming, or something like that. But, I don't know. I feel like that's definitely one of them. We already mentioned like VR. I think that's another one where I think there's opportunity there. There's obviously a really high barrier to entry there. Like I have a VR headset. I use it occasionally, but I know that it's really hard to develop games with VR too. There's all sorts of like physical constraints too. Like a lot of people that you can have the best high-end VR headset and people still get motion sickness from it, and you like physically get sick just playing it after like 20 minutes. It's like you just can't play a game. Like you just can't play a game that you get actually physically sick from. So I guess I just yearn for like more simplicity. Like I really worry about like I'm trying to get like my 4-year-old kind of into games. She's almost 5 now, and it's like I think of like the games that I had to play back in the day, and it's like it was very much like kind of like I'm sure Chris, like like some of those arcade games where it's like the mechanics are like really simple, and it's like I really struggle with like finding games nowadays where it's like Pac-Man, where it's like you don't even know how to have to read. Like there's no text. You just run around and eat some bullets, and get eaten by the ghosts. Like that's it. You don't even have to learn how to read, and it's like now it's like I have to like search a bunch of shit just to find games where there's no text because it's like my 5-year-old cannot read yet, and then and then there's the graphics of course make it really hard to play any sort of like more fundamentally games. I would say games have kind of gotten a lot more mature. There's definitely a lot more genre for maturity, and then with that become gore and that type of stuff. So it's like the games you can play are like much more limited in that, and it's like there's all these things where it's like these games are so hard, and it's like I can't get my kid to play it because it's just too hard. Like I try and have I try to have her play like Mario Kart, and it's like the Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo was way easier even than Mario Kart 8 on the Wii or on the Switch. It's like there's all this shit to learn. And it's like before it was like truly just like A and turn, like that was it. How do you, Chris? Like, how did you teach? How did you teach your kids how to play games?
I didn't really. They just picked it up themselves. Really, to be honest, between them and their friends, and because, like I said, I'm not the most experienced when it comes to video games. So yeah, I mean, I did play some, like I remember with Andy, my oldest, I played GameCube, and we played Super Mario Sunshine, but he schooled me on that. He was the one that taught me.
Is that like a platformer, if I remember right?
Yeah, 3D platformer, right?
Yep.
You have the backpack with like the water kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Where you could,
okay.
Yep.
That was fun. I put that on an emulator. I wish I was young enough to play that. Or when that came out, it was so cool.
That was especially for its day, that was a very cool game. Yeah. But yeah, no, sorry. They schooled me.
Yeah, my plan for my children is I'm hoping by the time that there is either like collegiate esports taking off, right? So I'll start them young, right? I'll do some Counter Strike, right? Do some aim training, right? Get them into some like local club, right? I'll coach if I need to. Okay, there, aim training. And then when they're around the like age of like 13, 14, I'll probably get them a boot camp, and either like if they're doing a tactical FPS, we'll get them in Denmark. If they're doing a MOBA, we'll get them in Korea. Really gonna make sure I'm gonna have the next Michael Jordan for esports.